On this episode of That Kingsville podcast, Mayor of Essex and ELK Chair Sherry Bondy and Deputy Mayor of Kingsville and ELK board member Kim DeYong join us and have an extensive conversation about ELKs. This is almost an hour of everything that everybody's talked about ELK and what's going on and all the changes and what's happening.
They're surprisingly specific about why your power's out.
Right. Yes. Steve, any puns you got for the intro?
No. It's powerful stuff. That's all.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, good.
It's shocking what gets disclosed.
Shocking
It'll spark a
revelations.
great debate.
It will
Oh,
spark.
these one-liners.
That's why you tune in.
I need to be grounded.
We also talk about council briefs, council news,
Positively.
Main Street Development Committee's decision, not decision, decision through council, some water on the west side,
Yep.
and council chambers moving. All that and more on this episode of That Kingsville Podcast. That Kingsville Podcast is proudly supported by Kingsville Brewery and the Tap House 127. Enjoy live music every Friday and Saturday night starting at 7:30 at Tap House 127.
Yeah.
Open daily, Monday and Tuesday, 11:30 to 8 p.m., Wednesday and Thursday, 11:30 to 9 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 11:30 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Sunday, 11:30 to 8. Plus, make sure you go and get some of the ready-to-drink pink lemonades, because those are fantastic.
Yeah, they're delicious.
We have been buying them in massive amounts. They're addictive and they're delicious.
Mhm.
And also, while they're still available, see if there's any cerveza left, because that is also a fantastic brew. So check it out at the Tap House. I know the beer garden's closed for the season now.
They got it at all stops.
They do have it out at all
Yeah.
stops.
I was
So,
watching my kids roll around on a hay bale and while I'm sipping on beer.
hey, not a bad way to spend.
I had about 5 more, and then I went and rolled around in a hay bale. It's great.
Not a bad way to spend a Saturday afternoon at Allsop's Pumpkin Farm and whatnot. So thank you, Kingsville Brewery and Tap House 127, for supporting That Kingsville Podcast. Welcome back to That Kingsville Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Hunt. Kevin Black, Steve Ianson, special guests with us tonight. We're going to talk ELK for an hour, folks. Mayor of Essex, Sherry Bondy, and ELK board chair, I should say, and Kim DeYong, Kingsville Deputy Mayor and ELK board member. Thank you, ladies, for joining us on That Kingsville Podcast.
Thank you for having us. Fairly important topic.
An incredibly important topic. So, yeah, we'll dive right in. Like, everybody knows who ELK is. Everybody understands. You kind of need them, or a lot of the people in the area. Either you're a Hydro One customer or you're an ELK customer. There's 13,000-ish customers for ELK in the area.
Yeah, it's a small utility embedded in Hydro One territory. So that brings its own complication, right? We're dependent on supply from Hydro One. So we are just a distributor. We're not a producer. So that's something that we always have to keep in mind. The problem could be on our end, or it also could be on Hydro One's end.
So that kind of gets us right into the first meat and potatoes topic. Supply and outages have been problematic and regular for both Essex and Kingsville for years. We've had regular outages in fair weather, extended outages in some not so fair weather. And the both of you through the last few years have been very vocal about what's gone on with ELK. And this past March, or January, that you guys joined the board and decided you were going to have some influence. So in the past 7-8 months since you've joined, what are some of the things that you've seen that you may have disagreed with what was happening, and what are some of the things that you're starting to see as you continue on?
I will back it up to the last term of council, because the town of Essex is the sole shareholder. So what we realized is 5 Essex council members were on the ELK board. And that became problematic because the shareholder really didn't have a voice on the outside questioning. So heading into this term of council, we really revamped the ELK board. And we only have 2 Essex councillors, myself and the deputy mayor. And now we always have somebody from the town of Kingsville and somebody from the town of Lakeshore. That's part of our condition. And we also brought in 2 community experts this term. So we've reduced the amount of board members, but we've upped the level of expertise. So that's the first thing that we did to make a change this term.
I think for me, it was about transparency. As a council member of Kingsville, I had no idea what was going on at ELK. We had a board rep. It was an unelected person who was under restriction due to closed session rules, and so really couldn't tell us anything. So we had a rep, but really no information. And so one of the first things it was to get as much as possible available to the public. So we have publicly posted minutes now. We have them on the website. We post them on social media. I think just the transparency of what happens at ELK was a big. It's been something I've done at Kingsville Council too. We never live streamed before I got there. It was one of my first things I did. And I think when people know what's going on, they understand, and then maybe they can have. When you understand, you just have less questions, less concerns. I don't know.
You can't just shoot at the moon and be like, "Oh, what's happening over there? I don't know." Yeah.
Well, and maybe we can kind of get into that a little bit, because we're starting to see what's happening. But for both of you, I'm sure it was pretty eye opening when you first, start pulling the curtain back and, realizing what's happening, the state of the ELK infrastructure. What were a couple of maybe, I don't want to call them highlights because it's not really highlights, but what were a couple of the key points that you kind of had that aha moment when you started, looking close?
They still happen.
Yeah, every meeting.
So you should start by talking about what happened right as we took
Sure.
over the board, like the very first thing we learned about.
So because of the election, our new board took place in January. So we had a board meeting and we asked where the CEO was, and, we didn't get a straight answer. And then in 10 days, we found out the CEO was retiring.
Oh.
So we had to act fast as a board, knowing that we wanted to change the direction of the board. We wanted to really make improvements. And we knew that having just one person in place, bringing in one CEO, really wasn't going to do that. So we kind of we call it speed dating with utilities. And we ended up securing a 6-month contract, which we're now renewing for another 6 months with Integris, a local distributing company from Chatham, Kent. And that's been going really well. So each meeting, Integris brings their full slate of employees, experts. They bring about 10 people to each board meeting. They have people in the ELK office every day. And we're really peeling away that onion. And every meeting, we're still, I would say, lifting rocks.
So Integris started under contract back in March. And as it was explained, it was a 6-month term for the first, I guess, go round just to see if it was a good fit. What has the first 6 months of that partnership with Integris resulted in? I know it's just, as we said, there's a lot of things that have to change, a lot of things that have to go. So what's the last 6 months been like?
I think part of the reason we brought them in was because we knew we wanted outside eyes. We wanted deeper look into how things have been done. And we wanted that experienced yet impartial view of ELK. And they presented that. And that's certainly what we've gotten. They, every single meeting, including earlier today, they, have some report that's like, this is what we have uncovered. And so it is an ongoing thing. And it is honestly reaffirming what we feel and know is the problem of why we don't have great ELK hydro service. It's not one thing, unfortunately. It's not one easy fix.
Have they? And I know one of the requests early on was to get a kind of a breakdown of the current status of the local grid, and what some of that infrastructure looks like. Has that come back to the board yet?
So we're looking at a capital plan. We're also looking through the budget, and we're looking. There's a lot of moving parts. Basically, in a nutshell, if I was to say what is the issue with ELK today, I'd say 20 years of underspending. 20 years. The good thing is when the town of Essex bought it, ELK they use that dividend money, you could say, to pay down debt. So ELK has very low debt. Not necessarily a good thing, though. It's like paying off your mortgage on your house, but not replacing your roof when your roof is leaking. You have to have a balanced approach. There has not been a balanced approach. That being said, since Integris have taken over, we realized that staff health and safety training was not adequate. So immediately got a health and safety committee, worked on health and safety. We also noticed that we needed 2 community or customer service reps. We have those in place. We're bringing on a third because one's retiring. We need more linemen or line persons, so we're bringing those in. We need to do tree trimming. We've also been through several storms. So the storms have shown us really the weaknesses in the system. The first storm, Deputy Mayor DeYong and I basically handled ourselves, and we didn't have anybody in place then. We didn't have Integris in place, and we didn't have a CEO in place. And so we were kind of like using our phones to get everybody hooked back up. And now, immediately when Integris came in place, we entered a mutual aid agreement. So if the weather starts looking like stormy, mutual aid is activated, and utility companies around here start talking. So for example, when the windstorm came, we had crews down within 4 hours. In the ice storm, it took a day and a half. So we're doing all of these. There's a lot of little things, but a lot of big things. But a lot of little things we could do really quickly. And that's what we've done. The bigger things are going to take more time.
It's just even some basic stuff like there's one phone line, which is why we ended up being the communicators of the issue, because people couldn't get through. The only way you could report an outage was through Twitter, which is quite frankly ridiculous. And so upgrading the phone line, getting a generator so when the power's out, ELK still has power. Didn't have that. Like, these are simple little things, right? That seem like no-brainers a lot of times, and we're like, what, they didn't have this? And so from very basic stuff to really extreme system stuff, which it's really harder to explain because I think I barely understand it. I know you're not much better than I am in the techie side, but some of it's so basic, like, can we have more than one phone line so when 5,000 people are trying to call, they can get through?
Sorry, Steve, I was just going to ask some of that techie stuff. Is there a dollar figure to that deficit where we should be, that, ELK is saying we need to spend X number of millions of dollars to just get us where we should be at?
So in order to reach a state where ELK is like another modern utility, we need about 8 years of funding to play catch up. So in the utility world, every 5 years, you can do a big rate increase. It's called a cost of service application. The last one that ELK had in 2017 came back with an actual decrease, which is basically unheard of in the utility world.
Which just in simple terms means you haven't been investing, you don't really have a plan to invest in your service, so you don't get to charge more.
Yeah.
So you get to charge less based on what you've been doing.
Yeah. And then
Sound logic.
And so that's what we inherited, right? We inherited really low rates, second lowest rates in all of Ontario. So now in order to get it rate increases, which we're going to be looking at for the storms, for inflation, for, some bucket trucks, we have to prove to the Ontario Energy Board that we are worthy of a raise. And that's not just straightforward. Your application just isn't approved. So we have a lack of money.
And you're not allowed to put in an application just whenever you want.
Right. So there was a rate increase approved, I think it was in May, right? Which was about $2 per month for the average home.
And in all honesty, it should have been more, right? Because that's just keeping up with inflation.
Right. And then there's I did a little bit of digging. So there's a Z factor request that is being filed, actually, I think like yesterday or the day before, for the February storms, right? Is there an idea of how much that increase request is going to be?
So we have an application for the ice storm, and then we're doing an application as well for the windstorm, because while we're putting in one, we might as well put in both. And we're looking at a 2.9% increase with those two rates, plus our rate that we also want to get the bucket trucks. So roughly around $4 a month.
Extra so it'd be the $2, and this is not being critical. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. So we're saying $2 extra on your bill in May, then $4 extra on your bill when this gets approved, probably next year.
If it gets approved,
I would think. Right.
If it gets approved, and every utility each year, just like a landlord can charge, the consumer price index on a rental, every utility can do an increase every year. And I think everyone does, because why would you not? All of utility grids can use as much money to make them better. So we're no different. We're worse. So yes, we have that one. But by the time this next one gets approved, it'll be spring again. Is
there a thought that mismanagement possibly played into this a little bit as well? Like if they haven't spent the proper amount on grid upgrades and I mean, like our rates have, well, strange that they went down, but rates are, I'm one of the few that pays both bills, right? I pay a Hydro One bill at our farm and I pay an ELK bill at my house. And they're not significantly different. The Hydro One rate on a home is like, that bill is more. But to the average person, I don't think that they would, if you lived in Hydro One territory, if you lived in ELK territory, it's not like the ELK person is paying significantly less. So I'm wondering if they haven't been spending that money on doing the upgrades, then were they misspending, or is it like, I don't know. It just sounds weird that and this is nothing against either of you or current management or anything. It's just, do you see, like, I feel like it's that disconnect that a lot of residents, whether they're in Kingsville or in Essex, have a hard time being able to qualify, because it doesn't seem like to the average person that those two things would be able to add up.
I think that the former boards and former administration, and this just doesn't go to ELK. I think this is like a culture of keep things as, we don't want to raise taxes, keep things as low as possible. So ELK, the former board, the former management they really patted themselves on the back for having low rates. That also meant they had low investment. And so the system was running okay. It was running okay. It's like having a car. You have a 7-year-old car, it's but eventually you're going to need new tires. Eventually you're going to need new brakes. You can run it into the ground as long as you can, but for several years it's going to be fine. We're at that point where we're well past the point where we need to put money in our car. I don't think it was, to say mismanagement. I don't know. I think that's really strong. I say just different type of management style.
A philosophy difference. And also, as the chair mentioned earlier, they really focused on paying down the debt that they have from buying our portion of ELK here in Kingsville. So instead of taking money they could have invested, they paid down debt. And what we've learned is debt is actually an indication you're doing something to your system, so then you get to raise your rates. So having no debt actually also didn't help them when they're doing their cost of service. So
you mentioned 20 years of sort of underspending, if you will, and it's going to take another 8 or so potentially to get back to that. So that was kind of the first question I was going to have. But did the thought ever come into mind to say, you know what, we need help. We need to either sell this asset or diverge this asset in some way to bring in extra help? Was that ever a scenario you looked at, or is this something you're saying, we can do this, we can bring it up to where it needs to be, it's just going to take time?
So that's a good question. And the answer to that will be up to Essex Council. They're the sole shareholders. I do think they're going to take it seriously. We have a new council. They're going to be tasked with a serious decision in the next couple months because we know that we have renewed the contract with Integris for another 6 months. The ELK board, we're awaiting direction from the shareholder. That could be status quo. That could be sell. That could be merge. So that's not up to us on the board. And that would be a private conversation that the shareholder will have and they will make known.
Okay. And then the next question I have, so you're talking about obviously rate increases, and sitting here tonight, obviously we thank you for coming on. You're kind of the face of this at a time when there's a lot of concern for spending groceries. So you're going to be asked to defend the increase. So how do you defend the increase? I mean, we're talking obviously the need for it, but some people say, oh, well, I'm not worried about my power kind of thing. How, if someone comes to you and said, why? How can we do this?
I think the number one thing is we have to, right? We have to supply people with as much reliable power as we can, right? We are growing, we are developing. The amount of complaints that I get about, and there's two things that when we talk about power outages, we're talking about outages, but we're also talking about momentary flickers. And those momentary flickers are the things that I get the complaints about the most, right? We need to make our grid better. If we don't put money into our system, it's going to degrade and degrade and degrade. And then, people will have more broken fridges, more broken stoves, more broken appliances. So we're really at between a rock and a hard place. And I know, before, when I was on the board before, I tried to question and I tried to get improvements, and it didn't go easy. So the right thing to do is to stand here open and honest with people and say we need a rate increase.
No, and I think that's fair, and I'm glad you did phrase it that way, because at the end of the day, I knew what the answer was going to be, but I think if we can,
Communicate that to all 12 listeners.
13, 14, come on,
$6 a month is cheaper than a Generac.
Well,
right?
that's it. I've heard from
it's
residents,
Sure.
be careful what you ask for.
Okay.
Be careful what you ask for, because it will result in rates going up. And some people are happy because they work all day. They don't notice the blips at night,
Sure.
whatever. But they haven't taken into consideration the cost of having unreliable hydro. And in Kingsville, the business community alone has been able to quantify the loss. And I'm sure if residents thought back about some losses they've had, if they could do some timeline, they would see they're experiencing loss as well.
Right.
So that kind of brings me to next point. September 20th, you guys issued a press release about infrastructure improvement in Essex and Harrow about smart switches. So there's an infrastructure investment where you're going to install smart switches, which will allow the automatic, or again, correct me if I'm paraphrasing
Getting
this.
into the techie stuff now.
Oh, sorry. Where it will just automatically switch, then restore power if there's ever, some sort of a glitch or an outage or whatnot. So with that being the first kind of initial infrastructure upgrade, improvement, and whatnot, why was the decision made in order to do that in Essex and Harrow versus
Will you take it?
Kingsville?
You can take it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And it boils down to Harrow and Essex have 2 feeds from Hydro One, so they actually have another feed to switch to. Kingsville and Cottam, for whatever reason, have 1 feed. There's nothing to switch to. If the feed's down, there's no switch. You can switch it, but you're still switching it to nothing. The mayor and I have a meeting with Hydro One. The feed comes from Hydro One. We need a second feed into Kingsville, into Cottam. And ELK can't do that without Hydro One. So from the town side, the mayor and I are meeting with Hydro One, putting some pressure on them. They can drag their feet. They eventually do have to, because ELK's asked for it. ELK would like to get a second feed into Kingsville and add these switches. But until Hydro One comes to the table, it's not going to happen. So I guarantee from the town side, the mayor and I will be pushing Hydro One because they're also a provider to other parts of the town. So they do have an obligation to meet with us. And that meeting, I think it was just postponed, but it's coming up imminently.
Yes. So low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Harrow and Essex were the easier ones. We did tonight, and I asked if it was public because I wanted to reference it tonight, and we can talk about it at the open house. But we did approve a grid modernization plan. So Kingsville and Cottam and Bell River will be getting some upgrades as well. We're looking for fault indicators in different places. We're phasing it in, something in 2023, 24, 25. If we could probably spend $5 million right now if we wanted. There's also, some things take time. There's also supply chains. We're dependent on supply chains as well. So getting in some of this equipment, right? Like, okay, we have Integris, we have a new board. Yay, everything's going to be great in 4 months. No, it doesn't work like that, right? We have to wait. We only have so much money and the supply chains take a while. And then we need the people power to hook all of this lovely stuff up when we're already short staffed because staff are doing metering and staff are doing locates and staff are changing streetlights. So we are run incredibly lean.
And the smart switches is the first one that's been kind of disclosed and advertised as a definite step in the right direction. So I'm sure there's been many, as we've already discussed, about just infrastructure and general housekeeping improvements. What are some other things that are being discussed at ELK that are revolutionary as we kind of continue to evolve the way that we're consuming power and the demands that a grid is going to face over the next decades? Is there anything else that, is being...
You had me until you said revolutionary. Yeah. So it was like so simply, just some simple things.
Sure, simple is fine.
They used to estimate the health of poles, and now we actually go inspect them.
Hey. That's a plus.
We're back to basics here. We're back to basics.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. But
then the replacement gets done as it should instead of when they break.
Which was a point that I was going to make was and part of the issue that a lot of the public have had over these recent, severe storms that we'd had. And 2023, to compound on COVID, kicking us while we're down, right? But it seemed that the only time improvements would get done is as needed basis. So yeah, a pole falls down. Well, all right, fine. We'll just stick a new pole in. But to your point, the next 7 poles are still in that same degradation. So
Yeah, the grid modernization plan is a big step forward, because really we don't have information at ELK. Some utilities, the CEO can pull it up on his phone, see all the meters on the road, see what's going on. We don't have communication from the office. So a lot of it, people will call me up and say, you know what ELK should get? They should get an outage map. Well, yeah, we want an outage map, but we don't have the information in our system to be able to provide that outage map yet. So it's a lot of it is like the back office work, right? And, a lot of the terms and a lot of the stuff is like all over our head, because it's like, we need to get the SCADA system and then, the fault indicators.
Sure.
And so at the board meeting, we're like, yeah, that sounds great. But we're really missing the core data at ELK to provide better services for the crews to know out and about, which areas are out, and then they can troubleshoot and isolate. We're really starting during the ice storm. We had crews driving the street at night to determine who was out and who wasn't. When Integris walked into ELK, it was like, welcome to the 1970s. So it's a back to basics and then building up from there.
And some of the things that the smart grid will do is immediately we'll know, is it a supply issue or is there an issue that we have to get trucks out on the ground instead of driving around and seeing if we can find the problem. It's really the communication portion of the system talking to us, so we can act on it, and then the more simple things like the switch. So, there's the problem, flick the switch. We'll go fix the problem while everybody's still getting hydro, because we can.
Which could have been done years ago.
The switches could have been done, yeah.
I have to say, I'm having a really hard time with this. It's a serious discussion. I've got so many one-liners.
You should understand.
This
is our show.
But how they used to dance around the subject of polls, like that was come on.
Steven.
No,
That's not
He's
okay.
just a bad joke.
What is wrong with you?
Steve,
over
we
my
apologize.
head.
We apologize for Steve. He's the dad joke and pun champion of the show.
I recognize that it's a powerful conversation
It's
to spark
electrifying.
debate. Anyway.
One-liners.
I didn't
But-
quite get the joke either, so that's okay.
Good. We'll have to
So
re-
getting back towards topics.
And I was going to go back there. But no, there's a people element to all of this. And maybe it's good that there was only one phone line because only one person had to potentially take the abuse. But what's morale like with the team? Because, I remember after the recent power outage, one of the line people, they were driving down the street and I clapped for them as a genuine thank you. Like the power was back on. And my wife said, just be careful because they might think you're being sarcastic. And I would never do that. I would never do that publicly, obviously. But are they feeling the heat, if you will? Are they feeling pressure? Are they feeling, or, are they kind of away from sort of the direct contact and the abuse?
That's a really good question too, and I'll try to answer it as best I can. I think this year has been a lot of influx, right? With the election results, everybody knew that with the election, myself winning as mayor of Essex, I want to see improvements. So it's kind of, there is some flux there. I think there is, I think that they were happy. I think on majority that Integris is there. The cavalry is here, is one of the comments that we heard, because what they were doing was they were stretched so thin. They were stressed out over time. And then we have people that are we don't have enough people. So when we brought Integris in, which is why we didn't want to hire just a CEO, we brought in resources for every position, health and safety training, IT, things that people didn't have. Like there is a lot of regulatory work with utilities where you have to, put applications into the Ontario Energy Board. We had to get our year end. We had to get our budget. We had to get our accounting. Like the help that Integris has had, I hope has brought them some relief. I think morale would be good once the shareholder provides stability, saying, we're doing this or we're doing that. But I think it's definitely improved. I have to go in there every couple of weeks to sign checks. And I called Jim from Integris the last time I signed checks. I go, what's going on at ELK? I'm like, people are smiling in there. Like, I haven't seen that before. So, and we've done a few things for customer service, right? They're doing some all-day trainings, and that's going to help them. They've also, we've given them a half an hour in the morning. We've changed the open hours to the public. So staff having a half an hour in the morning to get situated, to get caught up on emails, phone calls before we open the doors to the public. So we're making some small changes to help the staff out. Everything we're doing, we want to help the staff out.
I think too, when you look at the very first thing Integra said was the staff need to be taken care of, and we need more of them, and we need to get them trained, and we need their health and safety to be a factor. I'm sure staff felt that. Like when they came in and we got polls and we've got customers who are angry, but their first thing was the staff, and the staff need to be taken care of. So I hope, I'm not in there, but I hope they do feel supported and positive about changes, and they can be proud of the progress we're making and the direction that it's heading in now.
Yeah. And one other thing on that too, and I don't know how much I should share about this, but I will say that I've talked to the union, the IBEW, and they are happy that we are there, that we are, taking charge, making sure health and safety is a big thing. Having a generator is going to be a big thing. We had linemen going in there when it was completely dark, trying to get supplies, trying to lift, the door with like little flashlights. We're on the right direction.
Talking through some of this though, when you're talking about things like training, IT, especially the regulation burden and some of that regulatory need, it almost sounds like you're kind of getting to a point where maybe a small utility doesn't work anymore.
We came up with the same question at the same time, Kevin. I was just doing the math. with the rate increase of $6, hypothetically, if the rate increase, it's only $75,000 more a month potentially in additional revenue. So yeah, we're at a point now where it is the overhead and the burden of investing for future infrastructure improvements, because as we know, there's more and more electric cars that are coming online. There's more and more houses that are being.
So I can, because I'm just bored. You wear both the hats.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought this wasn't an invigorating conversation.
We're putting her to sleep.
Well, it's a difficult one, though. It's a difficult thing to answer.
My point is, though, from the board's perspective, and I think it was first off, the board asked to meet with the shareholder to let the shareholder know some of the uncovering we've done. We want the shareholder to be aware of these things so that they can then make the decision. So as a board, we're just waiting for them to make decisions, and the shareholder has to make that decision. So I don't know if you can actually speak on behalf of the shareholder, because really that's not.
Well, I'm going to take off my ELK hat and I'm going to just put on my Mayor of Essex hat. I think the shareholder has some real serious discussions to take place. Okay. What is our level of service? Do we want to, we know that if we merge or sell, the rates are going to go up. Rates are going to go up anyways. But we know if we merge or sell, rates are definitely going to go up. And then we don't have as much control. So what are the pros? What are the cons, right? If we merge or sell, say we merge, let's just say we merge, we have instant skill sets from another utility. We have, instant IT, instant everything. So where right now, if we go it alone, we have a long road. So why the town of Essex bought it in the first place was for an investment. So if you look at our dividend history, we have taken some dividends. I've asked town staff to bring a report, which we haven't taken a lot. We've taken about approximately $30,000 a year if you add it up all over. So is it really, you have to ask, is the juice worth the squeeze?
I like that. That's my favorite one.
Is that?
Yeah.
So,
I like that one.
Right. So that's a shareholder decision, and I'm sure they'll have a healthy discussion.
Yeah. Like I come from the automotive industry, and usually when we start to see smaller suppliers get overwhelmed, then there's usually that hostile quote unquote takeover. Not to say that that's going to happen necessarily in this situation, but fact of the matter is that if Integris, with their infrastructure capabilities, as they're a much larger provider, or Hydro One being, I almost call them Ontario Hydro. It shows you how old I am. Jeez. Ontario OPG. Yeah. But logically, if there isn't a very solid plan for the return on investment for the shareholder and the consumer base for ELK, then I would almost wonder if the customer base would have any voice towards stating, hey, rather than keeping us in this lower state of service because of those choices, how do we?
So from my perspective, I think that came through with the election. I think that was an election issue. ELK and Hydro was an election issue, and that came through. So the public does have say, for sure. The shareholders are elected. So the shareholders have to listen to their electors, and we're their biggest customer outside of their own constituents. So for sure we have a voice. And, 2 years ago, Kingsville Town Council put forward a resolution stirring this pot. And I would like to think assisting in the kind of unveiling of the issues that maybe led to Sherry getting reprimanded and because I think it inspired you to even push harder, because you had us pushing and you're like, look, they're pushing. So definitely we have a say. Now at the end of the day, there's municipal policies and procedures. I don't think they get to do whatever they want. They're going to follow procurement or not procurement, but RFPing or tendering or whatever the process is for them, and do what's best for them as the shareholder. I think we would be silly to sit back and not try to influence in the way that benefits residents of Kingsville.
And Essex. So as we're dealing with the current situation, a lot of us after this prolonged outage in August have invested in generators. Myself personally, because a lot of our basements flooded. So this has caused a couple of different issues as far as safety is concerned. Now we have a lot of individuals that don't understand how generators work when used in an emergency situation. So if improperly installed and or utilized during an outage, can backfeed into the power grid and actually seriously hurt individuals as they're starting to fix whatever the repairs are. What kind of communication can ELK do in the interim? Because like I said, there's no shortage of looking at Generac generators or, portable generators like the one that I bought, just on standby in order to prevent, additional loss in our residences. So is there anything
This is the first I've heard of this.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
I wouldn't know how to hook up a
it's
generator.
You got it.
serious issue. So the backfeeding an electrical grid, if you so much as plug a generator into your outlet and feed back into the line and somebody's outside on the pole, they can get hurt seriously because there isn't the protocols for a generator. So
So it'll be at our, there'll be an email tonight from the chair.
they was wrong. And if I am wrong, I retract. But again,
No, we'll definitely look
as
into it.
limited
I can guarantee that.
electrical knowledge that I have, that can pose a big problem, right? A lot of people are bearing burdens of tens of thousands of dollars to install these generators, might cut corners and go, well, I know what wires are. I'm just going to do it myself. I don't need an electrician. I can just do that. I spit all over the microphone. I know. It's voice time, bros. It's gross. But yeah, that's the issue, right? We've already spent tens of thousands of dollars in floods and in the windstorm repair and the ice storm repair. They might start cutting corners and do things improperly. So that's a big kind of factor that might come into
Made
play.
a note of that, did you?
Yeah.
Hopefully down the line.
Backfeeders.
Right? Additional to that, load on the grid. Like I was saying earlier about electric vehicles now coming more and more online. November 1st, if I have my information correct, the Ontario Energy Board rates for ultra low utilization. There's going to be a rate adjustment then. But that also would mean that more people would be plugging in order to take advantage of cheap electricity. Are these things that are being discussed at the board about, hey, with the rate of adaptation for electric vehicles, how do we forecast any additional things that we need to add just to kind of keep things on the straight?
We haven't had really any serious discussions on capacity yet. I would say we're still in the trenches.
And we're a distributor, not a not a provider. So I think from the town of Kingsville's point of view, we've had some delegations with Hydro One about the huge influx of energy that's coming here. And a few years ago, we had ELK at the table, actually, and they indicated that it would get worse before it got better because of the work of upgrading. And by upgrading, I mean the volume of techie talk that I can't even properly, I don't even want to pretend.
You're not supposed to. Yeah.
But the amount of available capacity coming to our region is supposed to be 500 times more when this is done. And they're not done. And yet the increase of draw, I think, is leading to these outages. It's not just the fact that the poles are old and the trees aren't trimmed. It is greater draw The power's not here yet, but they say it's coming. And it's supposed to be, I think, done by the end of 2025. We're about halfway through this big upgrade. Will it be enough? I don't know. But it's supposed to be enough, not just for us, but the whole southwestern Ontario.
Well, the grid and this is the way it was explained to me years ago when Hydro One was first talking about doing the new transmission,
One of those techie words.
Not transfer. That's waste.
That's great. Yeah, garbage.
Yeah, that's garbage. Transmission station on Road 6 was that was going to have the same capacity as the city of Ottawa. And the reason was greenhouses, because they knew that 100% greenhouses were going to require
How many years ago was that, Kevin?
That would be at least 10.
Because I think it's way more than that now.
Yeah.
Because of the electric vehicle and I want to say 500 somethings, but I don't even think that if I got the number right, we would all understand what that meant in terms of what we have now. But it's supposed to be. When I heard like, here's what we have now and here's where we're going, it was a huge exponential increase in available power. It might all get sucked up by one factory in Windsor for all I know. But it is supposed to be the answer to our energy needs. Mm-hmm. It is a big investment.
And that's another thing. I know that ELK is often in the hot seat, but we're working a lot harder to get the cause of the outage out on our social media. So if you see that it says loss of supply, that means loss of supply from Hydro One. So a lot of the times, I know that, Kingsville was hit really hard and a lot of people were without power. We have to decide was it ELK or was it Hydro One? And sometimes, it can be in ELK territory. It can push out something in Hydro One and then ELK says loss of supply. So they're really interconnected. And the feeds that we have down here in, Kingsville, Harrow, Essex, all the way to Amherstburg are really old. We're talking really old infrastructure here with Hydro One. So something that I talked to my CAO again about today, we've had Hydro One to our council about every 6 months. So I said to our CAO in Essex, I'm like, we're due, get them back. I'm like, I want to know what they've done recently for investments and what they're continuing to do, because it takes two.
We have the same request to have them come to the council table and talk about those investments for sure. I think it was 2 storms ago. I don't know, I've lost count of the storms, but there was a point where ELK was up before Hydro One customers, because I hear from both, because I'm
that was the wind.
Well,
July.
And we were up here in town before Hydro One, just outside of town. Not by, half a day or anything, but definitely before. And I made a point of okay, there is some improvement, because that certainly didn't happen at the ice storm.
Well, there was some Hydro One trucks on the Peely Island or two headed over to the island, because I was on the island when they had an outage earlier that day. So anyway, there's a million different causes, both natural and whatnot. And we're not debating that. Power outages are an inevitability. So what we as the show hosts and I guess the consumer public, we expect that there's that plan going forward in order to make the grid more robust, make the supply more robust, make the experience of using ELK as a utility to be more reliable. And another press release that just came out last week, ELK is hosting a town hall here in the town of Kingsville on October 17th from 6 to 8 at the Unico Hall, 37 Beach Street.
Unico.
The Unico Center, Unico building.
First of its kind for ELK, again on the transparency. I think, I asked if we could do this in Kingsville. It was an immediate yes from the chair and from the management lead. We're going to have our lead engineer there, some communication staff. We'll have town staff there if the questions cross over into town territory. Mm-hmm. I think, residents need an opportunity to be heard. They need an opportunity to hear where we're headed, why they're not getting a switch this year. I'm sure that'll come up. And I think, again, just people knowing what's happening and being heard is important.
Yeah, communication is key. So we got, social media, Twitter, Facebook. Getting on Facebook was, I think, one of the first things we did as well. Just people, when they understand something, it's a little less contentious, right? Before, the big time that I got my money taken away, I was actually a Hydro One territory, and a tractor took out a guy wire, those like yellow wires. And I posted about it and anything. Next thing I know, I'm losing my money or whatever. But people, when they understand what happened, motor vehicle accident, right? Transformer blew up. Then they're a little more understanding.
Yeah.
So we need to up the communication.
Well, and I think level setting, right? Like say, you're going to be out for a day. And that will suck. But if you say you're going to be out for an hour and you're out for 5 hours, that's worse.
Yeah.
That level of communication or the expectation that the remedy would be a short duration and then has extended into because it's out of other people's control or it's a far more severe issue. When students, you start peeling back the layers and oh no, this repair is going to take a lot more investment and whatnot. So this town hall meeting that's on Tuesday, the 17th, again, 6 to 8 at the Unico Hall in Kingsville.
Can I say one more thing about that, Dave? So we do have a request out if you have specific questions to send them in ahead of time.
This is what I was going to ask, what the format was.
Yeah, so I mean, it'll be, I don't know that we know the exact format. We'll probably just wing it. But if you have specific questions and you want to make sure that the answer is there, it would be nice to submit them ahead of time. The email is in Gary's hands, and I'm sure he'll flash it up on the screen because I don't know it off the top of my head. But send in your questions, and that way, we can actually have the answers. I think we'll have copies of the minutes. I'll make a bunch of copies of minutes so you can see the work that's been done. And probably we'll have a component where people just come up and ask questions, but I think we also have stuff to share. We have information to share. So it's a first ever, so we don't have a real blazing the path here of ELK
Lots of
public
poster
engagement.
Yeah,
Lots of poster
No,
boards.
there won't
It
be
will
a poster
generate
board.
excitement.
We got one.
Shocking. Shocking.
Shocking. Don't do that.
Oh, that one.
Come on.
Oh,
Given the, I guess the temper, the mood of a lot of hot button issues that have happened in our community, at least, and I'm sure Essex has their fair share.
Nah, none.
No, it's quiet. It's
Yeah.
quiet.
I'm hoping that the understanding of what is being attempted is received and kind of can quench some of those appetites for the answers, because as you said, this is the first opportunity that transparency and communication is being extended in this format. Like a lot of people, since, and we'll go back to the newspaper way back in our days, a lot of that information was sent out in press release, and a lot of people were able to pick up the Kingsville Reporter and see, or the Essex paper and see what was being communicated. And we've lost that line of communication for at least a certain demographic that isn't tech savvy. So having this as an opportunity in order to go find out the information, because I'm sure everyone is as concerned as people that rely on power for more than just keeping your stuff cold.
I'm sure the Harrow News will be there too. We'll get them there to cover it. They cover a lot of Kingsville stuff.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, they're filling
Somebody
the gaps.
needs to.
Yeah.
They're filling
It's
in the
good.
gaps. Yeah.
Newspaper print really still works. Like
Yeah.
it does. I tried everything in the last election and
What do you say, Steve?
it all
Hey.
works.
Give it another crack?
No.
Do it in your
I
basement?
did my 20 years.
Yeah.
That's okay.
No, but that's the understanding of how society is changing and how communication is received. We're forgetting that there is demographics that aren't able to receive that message, and I'm sure that a lot of their frustration stems from misunderstanding or not knowing what is causing their outages. So it's a great opportunity for some of those individuals to get caught up to speed, as well as others that want to speak about concerns that they have that haven't really had a voice. So it should be a electric event on Tuesday. Come on, Steve, get them all out. Get them all. You're itching.
Oh, I got no one.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's great. After the last the flood, so 3 storms, after the last one, I went to the CEO and I said, I want to have coffee events in all wards in Essex. So we got coffee, we got the room, we did it. There was a lot of hydro talk, mostly flooding, but there was hydro talk. And I think at the end of the meetings, people were like, thank you. And I would open up every meeting with, we're all here to make the community better, right? We didn't run for council. We didn't try to get on the ELK board to make it worse. Like, we're trying to make it better. And I think we have the right people in place now. Our ELK board is really strong. we have somebody on there that works at Essex Power and somebody on there that works at Enwin, which is kind of gray sometimes, right? Because, you don't normally do that. But we knew that we needed to have people on there that could validate what our CEO or what Integris was bringing us. So now we're making some real significant gains. And I don't think we would have seen this had we had different election results or a different board.
The transparency is great because it always used to feel like there was a media blackout.
There was.
Oh,
He's just puns bound.
Anyway.
So the share,
but there was.
Yeah, there was.
There was.
Yeah, getting hold at ELK was always
No.
And as a counselor before, so say I was a counselor and I wanted to ask you and you're a board member, you couldn't talk to me.
Yeah.
I couldn't know. Now we
You were kept in the dark?
I was kept in the dark. Yeah. So now we've opened those lines of communication
And
a
it's
lot more.
enlightening.
He can't help himself. He can't. So the next big conversation then is with the shareholder. So the Essex Council and whatnot. Do we anticipate when that is going to come to council?
I can't say.
Mayor Bondy?
I can't say.
No.
But let's just say we're entering into another 6-month agreement with Integra. So that
Sure.
tells you that something should happen in the next 6 months.
Right. And after that, then the hard decisions will be made, and then we'll see what happens post. So until then, if anyone has questions, concerns, there are outlets now that they can get answers. There's attempts at communication. So, let's see where these improvements, these changes are taking ELK. And if you're listening and you still have concerns, and you're available to come on October 17th to the Unico Center from 6 to 8, speak up, be heard. As Deputy Mayor DeYong said, send in your questions. Make sure that they're known and understood. That's the only way that we actually get some sort of conversation started, is if we're asking and talking. So
Absolutely.
on that note, thank you very much, Sherry, Kim, for joining us on this episode of That Kingsville Podcast. Very enlightening.
Thanks for having us.
Good.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah, no, can't wait to find out what the next chapter holds. So
Okay.
thanks again.
See you on Tuesday.
On Tuesday. Well, that was a lovely opportunity to speak to Sherry and Kim from ELK's board and get some insight into what everybody's been discussing with all the severe storms. Like, where's my power? So yeah, go to the open house. Have that discussion at the town hall, I should say, town hall meeting.
Well, and I think and we were asking them a lot of questions about rates, but I think what really it boils down to is if you don't like having power outages, understand that you are going to have to pay more money for the power.
Yeah. And there's, this is one of many different things that are going to be addressed in the town of Kingsville in years to come. Another being expansion. And Kev, there was some decision at council this week.
Well, it's there. Do we want to get right into the decisions of this week? We should wrap up the last meeting.
Yep.
So we did talk about the Main Street Development Committee's not actual recommendations.
Not actual recommendation. That went to council. That kind of got changed and then got passed.
So the new recommendations breaks the town up into 3 zones. So the downtown zone is Spruce to Prince Albert, I want to say. Well, it's basically a little bit further out. It's like around to the ravine.
Church to church, I think is what they were saying.
Church to church. Well, that's Spruce to Prince Albert. Yeah, that's the exact definition of it.
Yep.
All right, so that's a 3-story limit. Now, there's discussion at council. What does that even mean? Because you can't go build anything.
I was going to say, how do you have a 3-story limit when the library's right in between? Anyway.
Well, future development.
Future story joke.
Yes.
Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Steve, you're on fire
No,
today.
I'm not.
This
Go.
episode is like
But the
fun counter.
The question was, what happens if something happens to one of the buildings? The building is torn down, an unfortunate fire, which has happened in the history of Kingsville.
We're due.
So
Don't say that. Don't say
So
that. Especially during Fire Prevention Week.
Yes.
So then anyone could build a building of any size, the way that the former regulations were. So they instituted a 3-story limit in the downtown core. Then outside of that is the neighborhoods section. The final decision in the neighborhood section, which is from the ravine to now, it was originally to Jasperson. as an edge point, while the Zayres was kind of included in not included. But that's been extended to the entire east end of Kingsville. And that's the neighborhood section where there's now a 4-story development limit. And then the gateway section, which is now only the west end of the town, if you look at the map, and that's a 6-story limit. So 3 stories downtown, 4 stories for the majority of the rest of town, except for the west side, that is now a 6-story limit.
And we're only talking east-west along the Main Street corridor.
On the Main Street corridor.
Right. So, Division Road is a completely new ball of wax if there's ever development that way. So, yeah. Kevin, you attended the meeting?
I was at the meeting. I spoke on behalf of specific thoughts that I had about, because I am directly impacted by some of the decisions that were being made. I think it's a good compromise. I'm always leery about, and I raised this issue at council when I delegated, and have spoken to councillors and the mayor afterwards, and raised this again. I do have concerns about pushing the largest scale of development to the edges of our town, and limiting the size of development in the middle of our town.
Where in the local area has that been done and had negative impact?
And not that you want to point fingers at anyone like Leamington, where specifically they did it, 35 years ago. And we talked about it on previous episodes, but that's exactly what happened when they allowed large scale residential buildings to be built at the south side of Hines. It pushed all of that development down to that end.
Yep.
Well, of course, if I'm a business owner, I want to go put my business where the people are.
Right.
And all the big box stores are where everybody started drawing to because of commercial factor.
And you know what? And
cost affordability.
Right.
And this will be an extremely unpopular opinion, and I'll wear it. But honestly, I get that we want to maintain our town feel of being a small town, but the proper place to put growth is in the center of your town. That's where the highest density of growth is supposed to go.
But that looks too much like Toronto.
But
and Hamilton and London.
And would it?
Detroit. Well, Detroit's a bad example.
Well, no, and
Very bad example.
I somewhat agree. I see what you're saying, and I agree with that point. The other side of it, though, simply is more people, more traffic, and
guess what, folks?
some people say Kingsville has a traffic problem.
But it's
put the people where they're driving to.
Yeah. It's prospering. People want to be here. People are investing in here. People are buying houses here because it's a great place to live. We just knew about it first.
Yeah.
And we were here first.
Well,
that doesn't mean
you guys were.
Well, you've been here for 20 some odd years. You've been here long enough. You beat the influx of everybody. You were still here when it was not the hot spot. But that's progression. That's the evolution of a town. That's what happens. Either they grow or they die.
Yeah.
Speaking of growing, another thing that was discussed at this week's council.
So remember we just said that they want to push the majority of the development to the west side of town.
Yeah, that's the only available.
That's the height, the highest density of development in the Main Street corridor is on the west end of town.
Right, between
it borders on where the new West Side Collector Road, I think is what they're calling it, but it's the extension of Heritage up to Road 2.
Right.
So that project came to council this week, which is not just a road, but it's also a significant water main upgrade.
Right.
And I'm going to paraphrase a lot of the town and council discussion, but ultimately Road 2 has taken so long because they've been upgrading the water main that runs along Road 2 because it's the main water main that comes into town. And so now as Road 2 finishes up, there's a major water main that now is stopped at Division. And so the next phase of that project is extending it 400 meters to the west and then running it down to County Road 50 and ultimately, down to connect at County Road 20 and County Road 50, which will be the new West Side Collector Road. And then that water main would eventually run down 20 and then down McCain to 50. And that's servicing all of the growth that's wanted in that side of town, because there are 1,325 residential units already approved on that side of town. And there's an additional roughly 1,700 that are being discussed at the town with administration now looking for approval. So that basically, because we just had a discussion of how important development is and growth, and we need to make sure that we have all of this growth ready, that all of that development on that side of town would appease all of those requirements for growth that we are anticipating, not yet enforced, but anticipating in the province. But the issue is that work will cost $20 million.
Yeah, we got that, right? We got that in reserves.
Well, you would think, okay, well, that's fine because it'll be paid for by the developers. Wrong. We don't know that because the provincial government has instituted or has a proposed bill that will change the way development charges are collected. So developers may not be required to put that money forward. So to be able to pay for that, it would cause a yearly tax increase of 8%.
Just for that water main.
For just water main and road.
Just water main and road.
Yeah.
8%.
8%. So
not just one and done. No, not a one and done. 8%. No, in perpetuity.
In perpetuity.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people forget is that, it's 8% this year. No, that's 8% in perpetuity.
Forever. And that's not counting the 3% that they've already promised in some of the wage increases and staffing increases and service level increases.
$22 million worth of infrastructure building revamp costs we have.
That are going to require additional charges. So council decided this week to hold off on that work until they have some clarity around what the development charges future looks like. And then also they're going to be forwarding a letter to our local MPPs as well as through AMO to all of the municipalities across Ontario looking for support to urge the provincial government to come forward with some clarity around development charges so that this can go forward. Because really it's the catch-22 of the work the province is trying to do around getting more housing units. It's now preventing that from happening in Kingsville because the town doesn't know if there will be development charges to pay for the work.
Right, can't afford it. Can't afford it on their own. Right.
Exactly.
Very much tied into like the ELK conversation we had at the beginning of this episode. So that got deferred. Well, not deferred. They've decided to hold off on that project until they have some more clarity. The councillors were very, a lot of them very vocal about this doesn't mean that project goes away. They still think it's definitely a priority for our community. It's needed. It will eventually have to happen because if there's going to be any growth on the west side of our town, they need water infrastructure over on that side. It's just not there. And so this is a project that will have to happen. They just need to get a handle on how it's going to be paid for. And then lastly, in council briefs, so council's moving. Yeah, on the road again. They're going to take that train and they're going to move all the chairs and stuff all the way down to the Unico.
I saw the train the other day.
Did you see the train? You're like, hey. So yeah, the decision for a temporary location for council chambers being Unico Center.
Temporary. It's going to be there for a bit.
Well, yeah. Well, they need the space in order to facilitate all the municipal employees that they've added and are sharing spots at town hall and strewn throughout the different buildings around town. So it's not a horrible idea in order to convert existing space, right? They're not buying new buildings to just put people in.
There's parking, there's space.
Right. So, so it's a
well, and Steve, I honestly I don't remember covering meetings there, but other than budget, but you covered meetings there.
Yeah,
How was it?
It was fine. It was was a stopgap at a time when obviously they were doing some major renovations at the town hall, but it was effective. I mean, again, it's accessible. It's somewhat central. I mean, if, you know, in a sense of where the majority of the population resides within the town, not obviously as central as current town hall, but it works. It makes sense out of the potential venues they could have chosen. It seems like the best choice.
Yeah, and it also allows the other facilities to remain rentable, right?
Yeah.
You know, Unico, you lose its 100% utilization for any kind of event you could have there, but you know the user groups that do use that facility should still be able to function if able to in that building going forward. So.
And I think it's important to point out too that the tech equipment that's been installed at the in the town hall to be able to live stream movies. My goodness. That's probably not
You
okay.
see the new Indiana Jones? Go.
Want to do a quick review?
Staring Dennis Rogers and
Yeah.
Kim DeYong.
Yeah.
The tech equipment is going to be moved, so they'll still be streaming their council meetings. They'll still have all of the equipment to be able to watch online, and so hopefully it works there.
And it's accessible, as we said. It's an accessible building. It's not something where there's things that have to be overcome in order to facilitate the move.
Yeah.
It's just physically moving things there.
It makes sense.
It makes sense.
Honestly, it's dealing with the inadequate decision that council made 10 years ago to expand a town hall instead of build a town hall.
Well, you know, those decisions were made long ago, and we can only criticize those in just general conversations. And with that, it's the end of another episode of that Kingsville podcast. We want to thank Mayor of Essex, Sherry Bondy, and Deputy Mayor of Kingsville, Kim DeYong, for representing the ELK chair and board member and having the discussion today. I hope that some of the listeners and some of the observers on the video like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Subscribe.
Algorithm.
Subscribe. That's a tough one. Subscribe.
Yeah, it is. It's difficult. But again, we want to thank them again for taking the time out of their busy schedules in order to come in and speak with us. And we hope that if there were things that people and listeners were still curious about, that they could attend the town hall on the 17th of October, 2023.
Town hall meeting. At the
Unico.
Right. Sorry. I did say town hall twice. It's a meeting. Yes, I apologize.
Town hall style meeting. At the Unico.
We could call it Unico Hall meeting now.
We should.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's term it.
Unico Hall meeting.
Copyright.
Yeah. October 2023. Anyway.
Hey, I tell you what, I think from now on we should have referred to committee of the whole as fake council.
Fake council practice.
Yeah.
On that note.
Again, thank you everyone for listening, subscribing. Really helps. Thanks, Gary, for production of this wonderful episode of that Kingsville podcast. And we'll see you next time.